Hey guys, and welcome to Faewood. So I'm finally starting the Skeksis necklace, and I'm using an offcut piece of LACY'S stiff stuff that I dyed previously with just some black RIT dye, RIT dye, which is just a fabric dye. And I want to start by drawing the head of the scepter that the Skeksis Emperor has on my design, because I'm wanting that to curve all the way around the Skeksis face that I have. That's where this all stemmed from, basically. I've got a picture of it that I have from the World of the Dark Crystal book, which is a Brian Froud book. If you didn't know, Brian Froud is the artist who conceptually designed all of the world of the Dark Crystal. It was all based around his artwork. He also happens to be my favourite artist. So because this is one of the major symbols of the Skeksis, I definitely wanted to incorporate this into the design. And the best thought I had was to have it to curl around the Skeksis face. Because, you know, it's sort of the heart of the Skeksis symbology, and, you know, the shape that the Emperor of the Skeksis holds. And it's like of a bird swallowing the world is what it's meant to represent, which I guess is sort of like them, the Skeksis, taking over the world. I found I was trying to make it a little smaller because my first sketch ended up being a little bit on the large side. This whole thing is larger than I anticipated it to be honest, but sometimes when you thinking of a design, the logistics of it may not really fully be comprehended until you start actually creating it. And when I realized, you know, based on the size of the Skeksis face, how big I would have to do this, I realized it was going to be larger than I first thought. But, you know, I just went with it because I just felt like this had to be in there. So I tried to make it a slightly smaller than the first sketch that I did, and, you know, see if that would work out, and we'll find out. Now I'm using dry felting to do this because I thought about the shape, and I thought, how can I really capture the shape and the sculptural aspects of this Skeksis scepter in the design. And I wasn't really sure how I was going to do it. I thought at first maybe I could use polymer clay, but then I thought, no, I kind of want this to be like embroidery and beadwork and, you know, textiles, instead of being a hard, impenetrable thing like polymer clay. So that's why I decided to try dry felting. Now, I have never done dry felting in my life. This is how I tend to operate, throwing myself into the deep end with just about everything I do. So, yeah, I went for it. And I spent $20 on this needle, I might add. This pink little number here from Spotlight. It broke on me. It broke pretty quickly, actually. And then I tried to shove... I did happen to have another felting needle, which someone must have given me at some point. And I had just never got around to using. Thank goodness though, because I needed it. So dry felting, a little bit different from wet felting. Obviously part of it's in the title, you know, it's dry. There's no water involved. With wet felting you use soapy water and you agitate the fibres once you've wet them. Dry felting, all of the agitation is done dry, and you basically use a needle that has very, very small burrs on it to basically puncture the fibres and, you know, beat them until they go into the shape you want. So there's a lot of stabbing, you know, just like stab, 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 stab. It's good for getting out your aggression, but I also stabbed myself numerous times while trying to do this, because my fingers were just slightly in the way. So be very careful. It's very easy to puncture yourself. But you just keep going until you beat it into submission. A lot of it, I sort of took the technique of trying to do it like a back combing, I suppose. You know, if you've ever teased your hair or whatever, you sort of combing it from the back, so and really getting those fibres to bunch up, and then to make the line between the segments, I would then really focus in on the point where I was wanting to show that separation of the segments of this shape, and continually go over and over it until it really started to show a clear line. And then you can add additional bits of fibre, of the wool fibres in, just by grabbing a bit, as you saw me do there, and using your needle again to stab at that into place. And after a while the fibres start to grab, because wool likes to grab to itself, and it's because there's like I think little sort of burrs or whatever, if you like, on the wool fibre, and so they grab at each other, at themselves, and the more that you agitate them to themselves, the more they grab and grab and grab, and so it becomes thicker and more solid the more that you work onto it. So if you want it really thick and dense, just make sure you've got plenty of wool, and continue to use the needle to felt it until it starts to really clump together into a shape. But you're sort of slowly, you know, pushing it into shape until it keeps grabbing and grabbing and grabbing, and it really starts to develop the right shape. And adding more fibres into areas if you're needing a bit more. You can't really remove the fibres easily once they're in though, so just keep that part in mind. You could cut bits out and stuff like that, but it would be pretty hard to remove anything. So just build it up slowly, I think, is probably what I would say. I did have some trouble forming a point as well. Now, I could have probably spent a bit more time on this, but don't let my footage fool you. This was a good 9 or 10 hours worth of felting. It's a slow process, so be ready to strap yourself in and, you know, take some time. I just have my bead board in front of the TV, which I think I've mentioned here before. You know, I've got my little Nana table, which I've had on my channel, and I just bead away on my little table and watch TV. And it's a very civilised way to do beadwork, if you ask me. As civilised as it can be when you're repeatedly stabbing something. So now I've got to actually create the beak shape. Well, in fact, this isn't even the beak. This is like the world. So if you have a look at the design, it's got a beak swallowing what looks like almost a thorn or something, which I think is meant to be the world sort of coming to a point or whatever. And it's usually shown in this kind of bluey grey colour as opposed to this bronzy gold of the bird. Now, it did start to almost felt into the lacy stiff stuff, it did kind of start to grab at it a little bit. Not a lot though. So you can actually get like a wool felt kind of textured base that you can felt onto, so you could definitely do that. I didn't have it on hand, so I just didn't bother with that, because it isn't going to really fully grab onto lacy stiff stuff. And what I did find is I lost all integrity of the lacy stiff stuff because of how much I had jabbed into it. So as you'll see me do in a minute, I'm going to glue another layer of lacy stiff stuff on, because I'm still going to do beadwork and things on here, and I need to have some structure, and so I need that stiffer piece on there, and I did start to lose a bit of that, so that's just something to keep in mind. Of course, this worked perfectly well, and I do this quite often. If I need to have another layer for some reason, I will stick another lacy stiff stuff piece on the back, and yeah, it works great. I'm in love with this paint. This Cadence DORA textile paint is so awesome. It worked really great. I had no idea how this was going to go, because I'm sure when they created this stuff they didn't think someone might paint it onto some wool felted stuff. But you know, again, this is the kind of stuff I do because I'm crazy and I'll try anything, and jump in with both feet. So I just thought I'd go for it. I picked the yellow wool originally thinking, oh well, it's going to be sort of a gold colour for the scepter, and then I could, you know, stitch over the top of it. And I wished I had have picked a brown actually, and I think I would recommend doing that if you're going to use like the same colour I'm going to, because you're less likely to see anything underneath if anything did happen. But as it turned out, it covered it perfectly. And, you know, when I was looking at the pictures again, I realised, oh, it's actually more of a bronze, not really a gold. And then I had this silvery... It had a kind of a gold base, this silver, but another very nice colour, same brand. And I tell you, I'm going to go and get some other colours of this stuff because it's fantastic. So you leave it a day, which I did, and then steam it, or not steam it, iron it with no steam. In fact, actually, I don't think it said what the settings were for the ironing, but I figured steam might be a bad idea. So I just made sure steam was off, and I put it on the wool setting because it's wool. And then before I did any other stitching on it, I wanted to secure it better to the lacy stiff stuff. So I'm getting it prepared now for beadwork, which I will be showing you in the next video from here. So I will be using this as a base for some stump work. Again, another technique I haven't used before, but you know, we're gonna give it a go. So I just did the stitches in the ridges because I didn't mind if that was pulled in. If you stitched it elsewhere, it might pull that wool in and leave a little almost dimple shape where you don't want it, so just keep that in mind when you're doing some stitching. These are just tacking stitches that I'm doing to hold it in place, and I will be doing nicer stitch work on this afterwards. But this is just to help me work on it without having to worry about it coming off or moving. And then the other one, I didn't want any stitches in it, so I just decided to glue it. I thought that would be better.